one that I think exemplifies a lot of what we hope for all of our students, that they would have identities of which they are confident and feel an acceptance that education can broaden that understanding. I want to first go back to a few of the points that you made. First of all, I want to thank you for the comment from Adichie and allowing that sort of multiple narrative view to be the framework by which you introduce multiple stories to us. Adichie has also done a popular TED Talk that I like to show to my students titled, "We Should All Be Feminists." And in this talk, "We Should All Be Feminists," she implores that we need a culture where men and women can be accepted. And if we have a culture that only prefers one gender or one sex, then we are all losing out. And I want to use Adichie to sort of point us toward a famous, one probably favorite feminist of mine. Her name is Uma Narayan. And Uma has talked about something that she calls epistemic double vision. So one of the things I like about Adichie and other feminists is that they worked very hard to legitimate that storytelling is a very true and very powerful discourse, just as true as scientific discourse or maybe philosophic discourse. And that stories are essential, maybe very vital to who we are as humans. But one of the stories that women struggle with that Narayan notes is that when women have one national or cultural identity and are asked to live in another, of which they are not the dominant culture, but maybe a minority culture. And then how women have to, and men have to, when they have this sort of double culture, or maybe in your case, triple, quadruple, cultural identities, is that they have to understand what it is that they want to be and how they want to relate to the other culture. In many ways, we could say that this is an epistemic advantage, meaning that they have a knowledge advantage that they can see with two sets of eyes. They can see their own culture and they can see the dominant culture. But Narayan also warns that it can also be very dangerous, because when men and women have to work with this double, triple, quadruple cultural understanding, it's very easy to diminish one in favor of the other. To start to say, I will become more like the dominant culture in order to maybe fit in better. The other danger is maybe to harden or essentialize what is the first culture and make it very firm and make that a point of resistance to the dominant culture, where something that is a cultural identity that is very fluid suddenly becomes solidified and hardened and essential, and maybe I retreat back into my culture. It's a dangerous swing between two cultures. How do I understand what is the richness of my own culture, but not to make it static? And then how do I relate to the dominant culture in ways that I can actually be a transforming agent in it? As an instructor, I'm looking at Malcolm X's statement here, and he talks about children. X advises us that we must provide constructive activities for our own children. We must set a good example for our children and must teach them to always be ready to accept the responsibilities that are necessary for building good communities and nations. We must teach them that their greatest responsibilities are to themselves, to their families, and to their communities. My question for you, Maya, is what kind of advice can you give to those of us who are not Somali? How can we actually be good community neighbors, friends, to invite Somalis into engagement in our communities without asking them to lose what is their community? And also, what advice can you give to Somali students of how to engage with a dominant culture, such as the one that we see in Minnesota? One that is not static, and your culture is not static. How can we keep both, keep them growing, keep them active, keep them connected, but not losing themselves in one another? Thank you.
In my reading about multiculturalism, Europe has a very different experience than the United States. You know, we are called the melting pot. We have had generations upon generations of migrants who are from Europe and other countries. I was looking at some numbers, and one of my book club books they read was called The Giants of Earth. It was about a fictional base, the Norwegian settlement of Minnesota, South Dakota, and North Dakota. And one of the book club members said, do you know what percentage of the Norwegians wanted to go back when they came here? 100% said, we're going to make money, we're going to till the soil, make money, harvest, pay off the trip money that we borrowed, and we're all going to go back home. 25% went back home. So this is a realization for new Americans. There's a way that America really just gets its fangs in you, and you can never leave. Or you choose not to leave. I would like to say, as you said, culture is not static, and we're already seeing the generational divide. I think people need to separate between religion, tradition, and culture. Culture is affected by where you live and the people around you. Many of the Somalis that Dr. McGowan spoke to said, we can lose everything, but we don't want to lose our religion. So you can lose your language, you can use your culture, but you don't want to lose your religion. And it's one of the most important aspects of continuing identity, that you're saying, I am still saved, I believe in the religion of my ancestors and what's true, and they have kept that. So language goes away. A lot of the younger generation already have a hard time speaking Somali. Their cooking is highly American, which means the culture is going away. Now we have camel burgers instead of camel and rice, So I would say one of the ways you engage with the dominant culture, or whatever that is by being yourself and looking at your basket of identity and saying, these are non-negotiables. I'm going to carry these with me wherever I go. And then there are other ones that are not, very, very important. And you can say, okay, I really don't need to speak Somali the whole day, so I may not need to remember this language or learn to speak this language. And that's how I think it's, showing itself in our communities.
If it seems like I'm nervous, it's because I am. You said in your talk that education is an important aspect, and we all value education. And because the talks are centered around Malcolm X and who he was, I'll talk a little bit about what I have read. When Malcolm X came back from Hajj and from Africa, he decided to form the Organization of the Afro-American Unity, and he wanted Afro-Americans in Harlem and America and even the world really to unite and have from what my understanding, an identity of what it is to be Afro-American, which is more than one identity, obviously. And you mentioned in your talk that Somali people are very diverse, not only within themselves, but because of the diaspora, where they live and how many languages they speak and all of that sense. I'm actually kind of curious because the Somali history up until the diaspora has been one. We've shared one common history to a certain extent. Now, how do you think Somali youth today, or even generations down the line, when Somalia does, and if Somalia does become peaceful, will reconcile the multiple histories that we've become to develop because of all the places that we currently live in and continue to live in?
So I'm hoping that the Somali youth that I'm going to address today will be going forward as agents of social justice. And you can start in your household, and then you can start in your community. With a country that has so much civil strife, as a matter of fact, we say we have never been at peace ever in our history. Ever since the colonists, which were the British, landed on our shores in 1850, there's never been peace in Somalia. And if you think of continued trauma, war trauma for 200 years, of course there's competing histories. Of course the version your parents are telling you about how you were victimized is the only version you want to hear. So my charge to the younger generation is to do your research, to realize that if we are ever to reconcile historical harms, that there's more than one version of the facts that you've heard. And there's other versions out there. You mentioned that Somalia has one common history. That's not true. Somalis are not one monolithic, one-way thinking societies. We are as diverse as any other countries. We had Somali Christians that we continually deny exist. We have had Somali Bantus that we want to strip their Somaliness away from them, and we call them Somali Bantus to designate them as the other. We've had multiple languages that we will never share in our books and embassies and say they exist. There are 3 languages that are derived from Swahili: Mushunguli, Barawa, and Bajuni. Very legitimate Somali languages that you may never even have heard exist in Somalia, but people do speak it and they're there. So your charge is to realize no community is monolithic. We have diversity. We have, if you want to call them minorities, we have other narratives that are out there. And if we are to reconcile, we need to say, it's true. This historical harm happened to you and this happened to you. That does not negate you both have been traumatized. To actually always monopolize victimhood is problematic. We like to do that. We like to say, oh no, I am the victim and I just want justice. Well, everybody wants justice. And how do we get that? So that's my charge to you, to go and do your reading. Read, iqra. Thank you.
Okay, we'll open it up to the floor now for questions, comments. Raise your hand, identify who you are. We'll try to get a microphone to you. So, and you can ask a question to Maya, to Fadumo, or to Professor Crepo, or to all 3.
Since I don't see anyone raising their hand, I volunteer to ask. Maya, first of all, I want to say 99.98% of my friends in Minnesota are Somalis. I hang out with Somalis, and I learn a lot about the Somali cultures. However, my question to you is, all the different Somalis that I meet, they have like some kind of identity indifferences between them. Like, I go to some Somali places that they don't accept some people because they adopt to the Western style. I went to others, they don't accept others because they say these Somalis are extreme. So somebody like you working as an attorney, so how are you well accepted within your community? That's my question.
I would like to throw up there the slide of all my communities. I want to ask you, which one are you referring to, first of all? I'm well accepted in my soccer team. I'm well accepted in my community because I speak fluent Somali language, so it's better than the young girl who doesn't speak fluent Somali, and so would be said, oh, look at her, she doesn't even understand the language. But what I think you're referring to is a sense of feeling like we are under siege. Our culture is diluting, our existence is at risk, That comes from being a newer immigrant community. It happened with the Chinese, it happened with the Irish, it happened with the Italians. It's going to dissipate as time goes on. Because we are a newer immigrant community, we come with the slew of problems that all new immigrant communities in the United States had. And I think that's one of it. If you step away from Minnesota and you go to, I will challenge you to Washington, D.C., you would say the Somalis there are different. If you go to San Diego, where there's another large population, you would say the Somalis there are different. Toronto, same thing. There is what we call a Somali-Minnesota culture, and that's perhaps what you're referring to. I feel like I'm widely accepted in the Somali-Minnesota culture. I mean, how many attorneys do they have to go around? Come on.
This question is for my Somali brothers. So is it a cultural thing or is it, I just want to know the basis of this. A lot of my Somali friends are youth, most of them going to college. They want to get married. And they tell me all the time that we want to get married, but it's very expensive. So can you please explain?
Any brother answering that question for him? Somali brothers? Come on.
I need your opinion on that.
I'll take a crack at it. I think weddings are expensive in every community. I mean, let's be honest, okay? You know, renting the hall, the bride's dress, all that stuff. Weddings are generally expensive in all communities, and it depends on the kind of family you come from and how extravagant you want to get, right? So I would say that as a general answer.
Maya, sorry, I have a question here in the back. My name is Kurt. I'm a student here at MCTC. I've taken some philosophy classes, global studies, world religions, things like this. Some Arabic. I took 2 semesters of Arabic with the ladies sitting in the middle there.
Mashallah.
Shukran. You talked mainly about being an agent of social justice. Now, in my research and experience, I've come across Ayaan Hirsi Ali. I believe she was a Dutch parliamentarian,
Correct.
also a Somali native. I also understand she's somewhat not accepted very well in the community. I think I understand maybe why. I would like to hear why you would say why. If you know who I'm talking, maybe this is.
I'm very aware of it.
Okay, and this was for the whole panel as well.
Okay.
I would like to hear from. So I guess then maybe I could hear people say that she's demonizing for certain Westerners to come in country or read about, who give them bad ideas. But do you think that her type of writing of this social justice would be beneficial to younger, maybe Somali girls, Somali women? Would you recommend it to them? And that, again, to the panel, would you recommend the readings of Ayaan Hirsi Ali to Somali women, but maybe not to Westerners because it could be demonizing? That's it.
Okay. Ayaan Hirsi Ali comes up, I think, once a month for me, you know, wherever I go. And I read her book the year it came out. I belong to 2 book clubs, so I couldn't avoid it. But I didn't want to avoid it. I am a believer in reading books. I read the Satanic Verses when it was banned in the Islamic world. So I read her book. It's a very good story. I highly recommend it as a book to read. And let's not negate, it's her story. That's her experience. It's different from the experience of 90% of the Somali girls, I would say. You know, and I want people to acknowledge that, because when people see me and they say, oh my God, you remind me of Ayaan Hirsi Ali. Oh no, me and Ayaan Hirsi Ali, night and day. I come from a very lonely family. I was raised with mom, dad, grandma. Ayaan Hirsi Ali comes from a very displaced family. She starts her book with her grandmother beating her up, you know? I mean, if you meet my grandmother, she's the most adorable little lady ever. True story. Every morning after her morning prayers, she prays for Obama. She says, he's a good man, he should become Muslim. I said, you don't know, the left, right already thinks he's Muslim, you know, but she doesn't think that. So what I'm saying is, let's not deny Ayaan Hirsi Ali her version of the story. However, she has made it her cause to vilify Islam. And that's why she is an ostracized from the larger, I would say, Muslim community. There's an article yesterday in the New York Times. I don't know if anybody has read it or not. She was to receive an honorary degree at Brandeis University. And again, good old social media campaign went up, and Brandeis University apologized and refused, and now is not going to give her the honorary degree because of what she has said in the past, which is all Muslims are evil. They're wanting to kill your children kind of thing. I mean, some crazy, just stuff that I would not want to repeat here. So what I would say to the younger Somali girls is, you should read Ayaan Hirsi Ali. She's going to come up in your dialogue if you live in America. You have to know what her story is about. You have to know why she's angry. You have to know, what she's telling the rest of the world. So you answer in an informed manner. about her life. But I will tell you that if I were to start a social campaign to change a community about something, I would not go about the way she's going. You can't approach me if you want to make a difference to me, and the first thing you say to me is, you're evil. You're doing it all wrong. I mean, you immediately know the person will shut down and the dialogue will end. And that's how she has started her social justice campaign. She is actually, I applaud her for her campaign against female genital mutilation. I think she will find herself in good company with other Somali females. But there are other things that she's saying, like shut down all mosques, you shouldn't have Islam in America, or things like that. It's just too far out. Too far out, so.
Hello. I have a three-part question. Just trying to get wisdom and understanding here. When it comes to prayer for Somali people, why do you have to pray 5 times? Why the number 5? And when it comes to the workplace and school, is it a legal requirement that facilities in the workplace provide a place for the Somali people to go and pray?
How do you want me to do this? Should I answer their previous question?
Can we put you on hold? She's going to answer.
Okay, I'm going to answer the previous question, and then I'll say some of what I know for your question, then Maya can go and elaborate on that. So to the other question from Kurt, I'm going to say, unfortunately, I haven't read Ayaan Hirsi Ali's story. I know bits and pieces. Probably most of them are biased, which I accept. I think it's important that as a educated person, not just a Somali person, that you know when someone's speaking out against something, that you know what's behind it. Everybody has their own agendas, and like she had just said, she has some good causes, some good ideas. The way she went about it is kind of wrong, and the Somali community has, in light of that, felt like they've had to, disassociate themselves from her and say, you know what, she's not one of us. Whatever it is that she's saying is her own opinions. But the issues of female genital mutilation and other things are, social injustices, and even in particular against one gender, and have continued to be there. And those are things that we have to all fight against, whether it's Ayaan Hirsi or myself, or even just, Somali men, or, and everybody needs to fight against these social injustices. But you need to also be respectful of how to go about that. Is this going to be taken a certain way? Because you can only get so far in your cause if you're telling everybody else that they're wrong about the way they're, doing and they're operating. I can't sit down at a table with you, Kurt, and say, well, you know what, you're disgusting, I hate you, but you should listen to what I have to say. So that's just kind of my opinion of it. And then to the 5, that's so as Muslims, as a religion, we pray 5 times a day. So it would be dawn, afternoon, between afternoon and kind of evening, and night. And Muslims as a whole, overall the world, we pray 5 times a day. Now, for prayer within school and within workplaces, from my understanding, it is upon the institution, or it's the responsibility of the institution, to provide accommodations for people of diverse backgrounds, especially if it is for religious reasons. But I'm not the attorney here, so. Right.
Do you want to respond to Ayaan Hirsi Ali? Yes, do that.
I'll respond to the first question because I have read the book Infidel. I think that's the one that you're referring to. And let me say that I was working on that book with my thesis advisor, who is a feminist philosopher in Amsterdam. So I was able to sort of receive 2 impressions of that work. And let me say that from a Western perspective, I find her work troubling in the sense that it's a rather wholesale acceptance of Western metaphysics. And even people who are Western philosophers, we have some sharp criticisms of Western metaphysics. So in that sense, I'm critical of her adoption of it because it doesn't take into account all the work that's been done to sort of criticize this discourse. I would say that as a feminist, one of the things that we really work toward is allowing women to have autonomy over their voice. And I think if that comes into expression via a secular view of philosophy, or that comes into expression with a religious discourse, feminists work really hard to support that. And I would say that any time that there is a discussion about sort of a religious interpretation of something, I would appeal to people within their own discourses to help ameliorate that conversation. So some of the feminists that I look to in the Muslim culture are Amina Wadud, who I think has done a great job of offering liberatory views to women, but doing it through their tradition rather than opposed to it. So that was probably my own take on infidel.
I would add two more. Fatima Mersini of Morocco and Leila Ahmed are another, wonderful Muslim feminist writers. I think she answered why the prayer, and it's not just Somalis, so it's all Muslims. I just want to add a little bit of color to that and tell you, just as all Christians don't practice Christianity the same way, not all Muslims pray 5 times a day. And that does not negate their being Muslim. They should pray 5 times a day, but they don't. Ooh, right? And then the second piece of that is coming from the U.S. Civil Rights Act and our Constitution, that free expression of religion. So if you are a government institution, you cannot interfere with somebody's free exercise of religion. And that's where that comes in. So if you need a prayer space in that corner, it's no harm to us to give you the prayer space in that corner. And that's why schools and government buildings usually try and designate some area if they have somebody asking for it. Does that answer your question?
Some knucklehead eventually that some place employment, of course they wouldn't want to get in trouble legally, but what if they challenge it and say, we are willing to do that, then that would be a legal case, right? If they say, well, go to the bathroom and go outside, we're not going to create some, private space for you to pray. That's your issue, that's your problem.
Well, it has happened.
Yeah.
If you did a little bit of a Google legal search, we've had multiple cases about people being told to pray in bathrooms and designating the bathroom area as a prayer area, and employers refusing to allow somebody the 5 minutes of prayer time. They have been sued, and we have an agency called the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. So the EEOC, it's a government federal agent department. So this federal department, our local Minneapolis area office is in charge of Minnesota, South Dakota, North Dakota, and they investigate all kinds of civil rights, employment-related violations. So you can file a complaint with the federal feds, as they call them, and they will investigate and see if your civil rights have been violated. So.
Thank you. Okay, I wanted to tell you, Maya, I really appreciate, I'm really glad that I came here today. And I wanted to really say that you have had excellent resources, that you've given us excellent facts about Somalia and stuff. So anyways, I wanted to share with you, I'm going to try not to go on too long, but I am a teacher here. I've been teaching for 14 years here, American Sign Language. And all my students, they are hearing, but they use my sign language and my culture, and they're learning that. And they follow the American Sign Language sentence structure as well. So over the past few years, just really the recent few years, and the first time I've had a spelling student show up in my classroom, and that was really challenging for me. And then later on I was confused, but now I'm not confused anymore because you gave me all of the answers that I needed.
Oh, I did.
But also I'm envious of spelling people because I feel like they have the ability to pick up new languages very quickly, more than white people, sorry to say that, right, that's just my opinion. Anyways, but she's formerly my student over there as well, the president over there, so. I am very impressed. I want to thank you so much.
Thank you for speaking. Thank you. I just want to tell you that when I introduced myself before, having had friends who were of the signing community, I used to introduce myself as able-bodied hearing, because we do not appreciate how diverse we are as community, that there are many Somalis who use sign language, who use Braille, yet we don't acknowledge them too. There's 2 blind schools in Somalia, and they are over capacity. The resources for communities who need Braille sign language is just simply not there. So this is another charge in social justice.
I had a question about how do you, I've heard, I don't know if it's true, some Somali people don't like to be identified as African American or Black, and also about, to piggyback off what he said as far as legally giving them a place to pray. There's some organizations or employers that don't allow Somali people to even speak their language. So how can they give you a place to pray but not allow you to speak your language anymore? It's kind of.
I don't really know. I've never heard of a complaint that said don't speak your language. I mean, how would they even know they were speaking Somali and not one of the 6 languages we speak, you know? So I don't know how to answer that, but just to say, if somebody is targeting something ethnically about you, such as language, it is a complaint that you can file with the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. So do something about it. Make it better for the next person. Stand up and file that complaint. The story of the African and the African American tension, I feel like it's being overblown. And the media loves it. However, every single immigrant community that's insular has always bought into the Hollywood and America's history with African Americans. You know, this talk is named Malcolm X, and his most famous speech says, you know, I don't buy into the American dream. We Africans do, you know? So that's the first thing that when I read that, I was shocked in realizing, oh my God, the opportunities that African Americans were denied for so many centuries, and yet we come here and we want to immediately grab it. So all this to say is, Africans and African Americans are in the same boat. We will face the same structural racism that's already existing, perhaps we even more, because we may come with a funny name and an accent or limited English. To say that I don't identify as an African American is kind of weird. Once you become a citizen, you know, and you're from the country of Africa, you're one of the Africans here, so you're African American. If you want to, though, hold on to, as Dr. Ruthan was saying earlier, one aspect of your identity much closer than the others, then you would say, oh no, I'm just Muslim, just identify me as Muslim, or just identify me as Somali. You know, you can do that if you want. But for me, I've always identified as African American. It's not been difficult. I have 2 boys who barely speak Somali. They were born here. Trust me, nobody sees their Somaliness in many, many locations, except maybe when they're playing soccer with other Somali kids, you know? So I hope that answers.
I just first wanted to kind of expand on what you were talking about to this gentleman about praying 5 times a day. During Muhammad's celestial journey, it was initially 50, and he actually negotiated it with Allah down to 5 for us, and that's why we pray 5 times a day. And then also I wanted to ask, what lessons from like the Algerian Revolution can we learn and apply to what's going on in Somalia right now, and what can Somali refugees do to like help, you know, ameliorate the situation in Somalia right now?
before you sit down, could you draw parallels between the Algerian revolution and the Somali revolution? Or Somalia hasn't had a revolution yet. So I feel like
Well,
that they're different.
particularly, like with you know, the fighting between the French and the Algerians, but also what was going on in the midst of that fighting, kind of like how, I don't know if you're familiar with Franz Fanon and the way that he outlines you know, a lot of the psychology of
The pedagogy of the oppressed, right? The pedagogy of the oppressed. Yeah. Yeah, Fanon.
I'm sorry.
Oh, well, I was just confirming which book.
Oh, you know, things like, you know, how he advocate, well, yeah, more or less advocates on the role of violence, you know, within a revolution, and things like the grandeur and weakness of spontaneity, things like,
Do you wanna respond?
Pedagogy of the past,
Right.
yeah, Fanon.
Right.
There is an article in the Bockwell Companion to African Philosophy, which I think addresses this well. And it is a critique of the Algerian Revolution, specifically. And with some of the criticisms that came out was Algiers better off before they did the revolution against France? Because after the revolution, there was quite a bit of poverty. Sort of the average Algerian was worse off than they were under the French rule. I would say that it's a difficult comparison to make between Algiers and Somalia, because Somalia hasn't yet really seen their revolution, so we don't really know what that post-revolution state is. And I'd say even the discourse with Algiers, it's a very loaded conversation, because obviously there's a lot of European interest involved in that conversation. And I think it's very parallel to what our earlier speakers were talking about this morning about Syria and Egypt, that the status quo is often seen as preferable to the chaos of justice or revolution. And I would say that these terms need a lot more careful consideration. What is the status quo? What is peace? Is it better to be docile and yet have economic stability? And I think that's much of the work that we're trying to do in America, to say that we have economic stability, but that doesn't necessarily mean that we have justice or that we have peace.
I think we have time for one more, so.
One like right here, is that okay? Right here.
Oh, sorry, yes.
Okay, I'm Viviana. I have a question. I am currently doing training for a job at the Brooklyn Park Police Department, and I'm training with about, I say like 275 other people for the police department, and for the most part it's pretty diverse, but I went and I asked, well, have you guys ever had a Somali person either get into an interview or even apply to the police department? And they said no. So I'm wondering, is there something that's morally keeping the Somali people from investing in the law enforcement and criminal justice system?
Absolutely not. The Somali American Police Association's website is up. We have the largest Somali American police in our state. There's about 6 in Minneapolis, 1 in St. Paul. There used to be 2, the other guy left. Mankato has 1. We have a federal police officer here, and they have created the Somali American Police Association. We have 2 that are dialing in from New York City, who are New York cops, 1 from San Diego, 1 from Columbus, Ohio. So come on, there is no reason why we shouldn't have more police officers. As a matter of fact, Dr. Ruthan told me that there were going to be a couple of students today in the audience who may be interested in law enforcement, and I said, please link them up with me because I would like to talk to them. And as you guys know or don't know, about a couple of weeks ago, the first Somali American, she's the community liaison officer, was sworn in St. Paul, and she wears a hijab because the City of St. Paul Police Department now has a hijab policy.
Okay, well, that concludes this third event for today. You're all welcome back at 6 o'clock. We'll have some food, and you'll hear the speakers again. Thank you very much for your participation and attendance.